This is Chutes and Ladders, and it's a board game with a surprising history. It was originally called Snakes and Ladders or Moksha Patam in India, where it was invented sometime in the 13th century. In fact, it's widely believed that the game was originally created by Saint Dnyaneshwar, a revered yogi who lived in that era of history. Moksha Patam was intended to teach its players about morality, with the ladders representing karma, or the results of one's actions, and the snakes representing kama, or the desire for pleasure. The player's ultimate goal was to make it from the first square to the 100th, where they would achieve moksha, or spiritual liberation. In Moksha Patam, there were originally more snakes than ladders, further adding difficulty to the player's ascension. The title of the game was changed to Snakes and Ladders when it made its way to England in the late 19th century. During this time, revisions were carried out so that the game would appeal to a more contemporary Victorian audience. The snakes were now in equal numbers to the ladders, and the art on the board depicted more modern ideas of virtues and vices. In 1943, Milton Bradley introduced the game to the United States under the new title Chutes and Ladders. With a younger targeted audience, the art had been updated to depict children acting both virtuously and mischievously all over the board. This new lighthearted take on the game was extremely popular and cemented Chutes and Ladders in board gaming history. Today I have a copy of Milton Bradley's original 1943 edition of Chutes and Ladders, and I'd like to compare it to this current 2021 edition of Chutes and Ladders from Hasbro. Let's see what's changed and what's stayed the same over the course of almost 80 years. Let's begin with the 1943 edition from Milton Bradley, starting with the box art. Now right away, this is very bright and colorful, and this actually, you'll notice, predates when Milton Bradley started putting a silver or white stripe along the side of the box. So the art extends across the entire front, though we do have some Milton Bradley branding along the bottom there. I love the mischievous boy with the rubber band little slingshot thing going and the dunce cap. It's just great. This captures a mood, and I really like it. Now, the back of the box is blank. This is a lift-off top box, and it does feature the rules being printed on the underside of the box lid, which I very much enjoy having that feature in games. It makes it really hard to lose the rules. Also, what you'll notice is there is a small organizer insert for the game pieces and spinner, as well as some scorekeeping inserts. Now, I'm surprised because these scorekeepers are printed directly on the cardboard. There's not like a paper pad or anything for it. So you'll see actually in the photos that I have included, there's names and scores filled in here. So this game has been loved, but there are scorekeepers featured as part of the game's organizer, which I thought was kind of neat. Now, let's have a look at the 2021 edition from Hasbro. Right away, we can see the box is significantly smaller. We have some really bright, colorful art. Now, the depiction of the children climbing a ladder and going down a chute, it more or less looks like a bunch of kids playing on a slide. So it doesn't exactly depict the morality play of the gameplay such as the original 1943 edition did, but it's still inviting and looks like a lot of fun. When we flip it over, we have some standard fare for board game art on the back cover, where we have a few close-up images of the board itself, as well as some of the components and a little bit of information about what the game is like. When we open this up, it is a lift-off top box, and the board folds into quarters, hence the small footprint, though the rules are now a separate insert, so we'll review those later. It's a nice, colorful box, and the print quality is excellent. Nice, small footprint. It gets the job done. I think both boxes are adequate for what they are. The older edition, the board folds in half, so it requires this long box. But nowadays, space is at a premium with a simple game like this. You know, I'm not a huge fan of boards that fold into quarters. These little center folds here tend to wear out quickly with quarter fold boards, but with a game like this, where again, it's kind of for a younger audience, and when they age out, most kids don't like continuing to play Chutes and Ladders. It becomes more of a nostalgia piece. I can see where a parent would not be bothered by buying a quarter fold board, as the lifespan of this game is probably going to be pretty short within their household. So that being said, great boxes, great packaging for both of them. Love the art. I do really enjoy the cartoon art on the 1943. Let's have a look at the games themselves, starting with the 1943 edition from Milton Bradley. Now, Chutes and Ladders is pretty simple to play. This edition comes with a numbered spinner. Players take turns, starting with the youngest, spinning and moving their character the amount of spaces that the spinner tells them to. The spaces are arranged in a grid. There are 100 spaces, with 1 being at the bottom of the board and 100 being at the top. So again, very similar to that Moksha Patam, Ascension, and Snakes and Ladders. We also see depicted in the art all of the morality plays. So much like Snakes and Ladders and Moksha Patam, as players make their way to spaces, if they land on, say, a space at the bottom of a ladder by exact count, their character gets to ascend to the top of the ladder, serving as a shortcut to the 100th space. If they land at the top of a chute by exact count, their character will slide down to the bottom of the chute by default as a penalty for bad or viceful activities as depicted in the art. The art is, again, really standout in this. It's beautiful. I love how all the kids' activities are depicted so very clearly. Things like right away at the beginning, the young boy studying, he goes up the ladder and he gets his diploma. Or we have the young girl gardening and she's harvesting at the top of the ladder. Or a young girl helping patch up an injured child and them making friends at the top of the ladder. Whereas with the negative activities, we have things like 2 boys cutting each other's hair, resulting in them having to have their heads shaven. Or a child painting on the walls and resulting in them having to get a rough bath. Or my favorite, which is featured on many of the Chutes and Ladders boards, is the child pulling on the cat's tail. And at the bottom of the chute, they're all scratched up from the cat. So be nice to the kitty cats. So I actually really like the art. It's very clear to see what all the kids are doing. In most instances, that's naughty, though there are a few examples, like a kid ice skating and then showing that he's overly cold, where I'm not exactly sure what they did wrong. Maybe they stayed out too late, whatever. So there are a few of them that are just kind of like a life happens thing. But for the most part, it's either a good action, like for instance, eating well and growing strong, or a negative action, like pulling a girl's hair and getting in trouble and having your mom drag you home to go to timeout. So the morality play here is alive and well. And again, the gameplay is no more complex than, say, Candyland, only you have a spinner in lieu of the colored cards. Now, one thing that I really like with this edition is not only is the art very, very nice and very attractive, and I like the art on the spinner, though I will say having this little tin spinner, there is no substance to flick. So when you're trying to spin this, you're dragging your finger along the board, and I can see where the cardboard has worn from other players dragging their finger along the board, which this game had a lot of history. I have notes. We got this. We have notes wishing somebody a happy birthday on here. We have names of players on the scorecards, and some of these things can be removed through restoration. Some of them, it actually does more damage to try to remove them. In this instance, I thought it was kind of part of the game's history. So I kind of thought it would be nice to just leave this stuff, clean up the game, get everything at least presentable. But there is something about the patina of a well-loved board game, and clearly this game was loved in the home that it came from. Now, moving on, one of the other things that I like is the player pieces. I mean, for 1943, this is great. We have like Cowboy Joe and Sis and Bonnie. So they have names on them, and they have big exaggerated faces and expressions. And it's a wood base with a wood insert with a printed front. It's all glued together and everything. So, I mean, clearly somebody at a factory was hand assembling these. And it's just neat. It has a neat fit and finish. It has a very antique-y feel, but the whole package, from the color combination of the board to the box to the player pieces, the spinner, everything just ties together beautifully. So the fit and finish of the 1943 Milton Bradley edition of Chutes and Ladders, no wonder this was a popular game and became iconic. The messages are clear. The pieces are great. The fit and finish is awesome. This is wonderful. The 1943 Chutes and Ladders definitely pleases the couch. Now, let's move on and have a look at the 2021 Hasbro edition of Chutes and Ladders. Right away, we can see a lot of similarities, so the game hasn't departed too far from its roots. The player pieces are still nice, big, and chunky with nice exaggerated art of these kids. However, now we have plastic bases and cardboard pieces that pull apart for storage. I don't think that this is a downgrade in quality. I do like the big chunky wood pieces, but being able to put these away easily and sanitize them easily, be it that we have plastic bases. I mean, the cardboard is still a little touchy, but this is sealed cardboard. You can wipe this down pretty safely. So for a kid's game, being able to keep it clean, that works. I don't know why they reduced it to 3 players. I don't know if they did some play testing or a survey or something and determined that people were unlikely to have more than 3 players. It seems kind of like a weird choice to me, but whatever. The spinner now features a nice big chunky plastic arrow with this nice pad to flick, and this pad is really nice. It doesn't hurt the fingernails at all. The plastic is nice and flexible, so when I hit it, it's not like I've played with some older spinners before where you flick it and the metal just hits your fingernail. It hurts. This is actually all right. In fact, I kind of dig the little noise that it makes because there's so much play. It kind of rubs on the cardboard there, but does a great job. Nice, clear, easy to read. Now, when we get to the board itself, as you can see from the packaging, the art has changed quite a bit from the 1943 edition. When we get into this, oh man, and it has that quarter fold board, which is, I'm not a big fan of the quarter folds, but in looking at this art, they've gone a much more simplistic route. Now, there's still the morality play going on here. However, it's a little bit tougher to decipher. One thing I do want to point out, the kid pulling on the cat's tail is still a morality lesson in getting swatted by the cat. So points that stayed here. However, I'm noticing not many of these seem too much like morality plays. Like here, one of the largest slides is a girl holding what looks like an urn. And it took me a while to realize there's a puddle behind her. So when she's at the bottom, it looks like she slipped in the puddle and smashed the urn. If that's an actual urn, that's a really weird lesson, and that's a little bit dark. We do still have the kid graffitiing, only now there's not buckets of paint. It's like chalk or markers, and this time instead of being scrubbed, they have to clean up their mess, which I think is the better morality play here. One thing that I do like is the kid feeding the cat and then having a pet cat at the top of the ladder. So again, the morality of taking care of animals is prevalent. In fact, no more prevalent than this little series, which is the only spot that I got on this board right off the bat that had the same kid in 2 locations. So in spot number 21, a child meets a stray dog, and in spot number 42, where they ascend the ladder, the dog is now their pet. Now this is interesting, because in all the versions of Chutes and Ladders, one of the ways to win early is to land on spot number 80. Now, in 1943, spot 80 was kids making art and then getting the blue ribbon for spot 100. Here, there's no blue ribbon. There's just winner 100. However, on spot number 80, the kid who rescued the dog takes the dog to a dog show and wins. So I thought that was neat. Again, the morality play of taking care of and being good to animals, very nice. So I'm all about that. However, I feel bad for a lot of the kids who went down the slides because not all of them had naughty behavior. This kid was roller skating and he just fell. This kid's ice skating and he fell through the ice. That's a little scary. He's just standing there in like knee deep in freezing water, just looking sad. Or there's a little girl who eats what looks like a pan full of cookies. So, I mean, you can tell what's going on, but what's interesting is because of the art style, it's a little bit harder to tell because they're using this very, very simplistic art, and it's exaggerated in some ways, like their heads are really big, but everything else is really small. And so sometimes you really have to study it a bit to see what's the lesson here. Whereas in 1943, the lesson of whatever you're seeing is really smacking you right in the face. So I will say, though they're still sticking to that concept of either, you know, I'll even take like these shoots where it doesn't seem like the kid did something naughty. Like this girl, she did the dishes, but then at the bottom of the chute, they're all smashed because she fell. Well, it feels bad. She did the dishes. She's just being responsible. But I suppose they're trying to teach life happens. Sometimes you'll fall. So I get that. The core of resiliency is nice. However, it's interesting that they go more for a resiliency lesson than a morality lesson, yet the overtones of morality are still existent. So the game does harken back to its roots in a lot of ways. It's no longer a grid. You'll notice that it alternates in green and blue spaces that are sort of arrow-shaped, and they sort of snake their way, which in a way, that also kind of makes me think of Snakes and Ladders with the roots of the game. But one thing that bothered me is the new player pieces have such big bases. And sometimes when you're moving around, it just feels sort of clunky on this game, and not all of the spaces are uniform size on the new board. So I don't know. It's neat, it's lively, but it causes there to be a lot of negative space on the board, a lot of areas that aren't dedicated to actually play. Like we have a lot of this grass and this sky along the periphery here. Well, that can easily make up a tenth of the board right there, and just spreading out these spaces. I mean, I know a grid might be kind of boring. I get it. This looks boring. It looks like somebody took a checkerboard and modded it. But also on that note, the amount of play space that's removed when you're shrinking the board overall, like arguably the footprint on this board is much smaller than the original, though it is a hair taller by 1 inch. Kind of weird that they went with a more rectangular, though I guess it makes sense when you look at the older Moksha Patam boards. But still, there's some interesting design choices. I don't think it breaks the game, and I don't think it necessarily ruins the theme of the game, because teaching resiliency over morality is still a viable thing. So, and there are still touches on morality, and again, soft spot of mine, most of those touches are on treating animals well, so that's nice. So yeah, I think the 2021 edition has a lot to offer. It has some differences that I wouldn't consider necessarily drawbacks. I do think that the art is just fine for a contemporary audience, although I would like to see a little bit more detail. I don't know. It's just something about it. It almost looks like the kids are very googly-eyed. All I see is their heads and the googly eyes. It kind of reminds me of South Park a little bit, like a clean South Park. Now, before we go too far, let's look at the rule manuals. I should, actually, I almost reached over to the 2021. Let's start with the 1943 Milton Bradley edition, where again, the rules are printed on the underside of the lid of the box. I'm a huge proponent of having the rules printed on the underside of the lid of the box. It makes it hard to lose them, keeps everything together. I don't see any reason why modern games shouldn't do it. Great bonus points, great packaging, great rule set. This game is so simple, it requires very little explanation. So as far as going into the rules, there's not much. The actually picking up the game is very, very easy. It's a kid's game. Now let's take a look at the rule book for the 2021 edition of Chutes and Ladders. And I mean, this is a simple, again, what did I say? This game requires almost nothing. We have the cover, the back cover showing a picture of the game and your rules. There's no reason why this won't stand the test of time. It's just that it's a separate rule book, single piece of paper, prone to being lost. If they were to print on the underside of the lid, it'd be perfect. But still, serviceable rulebook, full color print, unsealed. Looks like just bond paper, but it's printed full bleed, so it looks very nice. So nice rulebook, will hold up. I just like to see them part of the box when you're dealing, especially with a game for kids. So now, here's the fun part, the comparison between the two. What do I think? Boy, like I said, I really appreciate the art on the 1943 edition. This is an excellent collector piece, especially with the wooden pieces here. Gotta say, this has been one of the more enjoyable antique ones that I've gotten a chance to look at and play. I very much like the art, and I like boards that fold in half, so I'm gonna say that my heart goes to the 1943 edition. Now, is that to say that the 2021 edition is not worth getting? No, absolutely not. The 2021 edition is more than serviceable at the cost. It's a great value for some entertainment for your family. It doesn't take up much space on your shelf. All of the components are nice, chunky plastic, well made. Sure, the tag board could be a bit heavier, but it's not thin enough that I'm really bothered by the quality. I think it's sturdy. I think the print quality looks great. Again, I'm not a huge fan of quarterfold boards, but in this instance, like I said before, a game like this is probably going to be in most people's households for a very short amount of time when it's being used for children, and other than that, it'll probably be collecting dust. So I don't know many adults who get super excited about Chutes and Ladders. But it is kind of an interesting piece to have, knowing the game's history. I'm kind of surprised about that. I didn't know that it could be dated back to 13th century India. So with that in my perspective when I'm looking at this, I think it's pretty neat. But yeah, the 2021 edition is a good value. Definitely, I would recommend it. I think the art is attractive, though overly simplistic for my taste. It gets the job done. It depicts what's happening accurately for the kids. I mean, it's like I said, when you're looking at some of them, I was a bit confused because I was expecting more of a morality play, and instead a lot of these are more of like life will hand you some setbacks. And if we're teaching resiliency, I always think that's a great message. So Chutes and Ladders, there have been a ton of iterations between 2021 and 1943. I'm sure a lot of people are going to have fond memories of one or the other. So which version did you grow up with? And what do you think? Do you prefer the 1943 edition or the 2021 edition based on what you're seeing here? Comment below, let me know. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time.